Let me raise this to you. I mean, you accept that money talks and bullshit walks, right? So the the political class is driven by the donor class. So where's that donor money emanating from? From businesses. And those businesses are either going to benefit or suffer from these tariffs. If the businesses are U.S. businesses, they're going to benefit from the tariffs because they got an edge now against foreign competitors that they didn't have. So my conclusion, one of the reasons I'm not as negative as you on the tariffs, is I think the money that goes to political campaigns that money is going to benefit from the tariffs. It's going to take a while, 6 months, 9 months, but they see the handwriting on the wall. They know that competitor that's been beating them up is now going to lose X percent and not in margins and not going to be able to compete. So this is a net good over time. And the question is how long? Now here's the rub. The Democrats are trying to run out the clock. They're doing lawfare and anything they could to stall the agenda. So the question any investor has to make is Trump going to be successful in implementing his agenda before, let's say, March of 26? Is he going to be done by the latest first quarter of 26? Is he going to have this all tied up with a ribbon on it? Or are the Democrats going to be able to stall him that long? And that's the question. I think that's the trade. If you can boil it down to that, pick a side, make your.
Hey everybody, welcome back again to Markets and Madness, the place where we talk about the madness that occurs, and we've certainly seen some today, when politics, economics, and personalities all move in different directions. We've been saying it for the last couple of times that we've got a lot of new viewers. We would love to have a lot of new subscribers, so please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, get the new content, let us know what you're thinking. So Tim, good afternoon. We just had the close of the stock market. It's Thursday, April 3rd, and it's not an April Fool's joke, but the market's down 4% 1,400, 1,600 points. What are you feeling? What are you thinking?
Well, I went and got a haircut in honor of the sell-off. We certainly had a move. The move was primarily, it began overnight, really. Started in Asia.
It began at 4:30 as soon as he announced the tariff announcements. I was talking to somebody this morning who was watching the markets then and said when he first said 10%, they said, oh, great. And the market was up 150 or so points. And then when they started to look at that chart that he put out of 20% here and 35% there, and then it just melted.
I've seen a couple of people say that Russia was not included in the list. That's because Russia is already under sanction.
That's right.
Russia's on the list. Wait a minute, he's sanctioning.
That's right. There's nothing coming in and nothing going out.
I watched Lutnick this morning, and he was very good. He's saying, it's not just the tariffs. That's not the issue. There's so many things. So it occurred to me that you've got a lot of internal motivators. For example, China. The fentanyl is bad enough. But it's not just that they're permitting fentanyl. They're actually subsidizing fentanyl producers.
I did see that, yeah.
Fentanyl. So, that's just one of the stories inside the stories, Look, we live in a society where probably 90% of the electorate, which includes maybe 85% of whom are investors, have 401ks or something like it. They confuse politics with economics. We've talked about this before. People say, this is unfair. Economics is not about fair. It's about supply and demand. And supply and demand doesn't care what's moral or fair. It just looks for the most efficient way to distribute resources, the most efficient price. Bringing fair into that conversation is a political argument, and it's valid, it's moral, but it's not economic. It's political. So when people look at these things, there's maybe 50 separate issues inside our trade relationship with the country. And I'm being kind. It's probably more like 150. But of those 50 issues, probably 30 of them are positive for us and 20 of them are negative for us. And if I want to distort to the viewer who can't distinguish between politics and economics, I can rip out that 20 and show them and create some kind of an unfair equilibrium between the two. So what this has done is given fodder to Trump's enemies. They can find a lot of stuff that's negative, and they can play with it. But all in all, it's consistent with all the arguments we've made. This guy is rebuilding the economy, and I gave a talk this afternoon, actually at lunch today, and I made the point that basically the economy was a patient that 30 years ago was maybe 15 or 20 pounds overweight. And today it weighs 500 pounds, and it's gaining 10 pounds a week. And we're acting as if this can continue to go on, and it can't. So, the Democratic Party is like the ice cream manufacturer. It keeps showing up, have another bowl, have another bowl. And now we weigh 550 pounds. It's never going to end. So somebody's going to try to stop it. And we don't like going without ice cream and going on a diet and, working out in the treadmill. But hey, it's got to happen.
Right. There's no choice now. We've said it a number of times. You kick the can down the road for 40 years. Sooner or later, the road's going to end. It's going to wind up at the end of a lake, and that's where we are. We're at the end of a lake.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't believe that. They think we can continue to tax and spend and print and spend and borrow. And, $1 trillion in interest has not even convinced them. They think we'll just print another $1 trillion. Then they scream when the price of eggs goes up to $12 a dozen.
Yeah. It's that bad medicine you got to take in order to at least think about getting better. But it doesn't taste good, doesn't feel good, but you got to go through it in order to get to the end result. And, I've talked to a number of people today about it. Some very, very negative, more so than me, and I'm pretty short-term negative. Some reasonably positive and think there's some, silver linings out there. But all in all, what I've noticed looking at the at my at the stocks that I own, my portfolio today, comment we had earlier this week about watermelons, the price of watermelons. Everything's being sold. Everything's being sold.
Well,
There's no safe haven.
I talked to my guy at that big house, the guy who runs that desk, and he said he's not seeing capitulation yet. He's still getting calls saying, is it time to buy? Do you think it's time to buy? He's still got a few of those. So there are still people having caught a falling knife twice now are ready to catch it again. And maybe they're right. Who the hell knows? Maybe we'll get a rally. I did lighten up on some of my short positions. Sold some short-term options, short-dated options, puts against the deep in the money.
Puts you on. Yeah, so you put on put spreads.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you put on put spreads and you earn some more premium back. That's not a bad play. I took off some of the protection that I have had on. I still got more. It wasn't a bad day for me. I can't complain. Seeing the market down 4% and I'm 0.00 something percent down. I can't complain.
The insurance worked.
Yeah. And I think they'll continue to work. I think we still got some more room on the downside. I was looking at some charts today. The S&P 540, which is right where we closed, seems to be a big retracement level. And I think if we get below 540, we have a lot of room to run down below.
People were probably bounced before that, though, I would think.
We're right here. And we went down once this morning, bounced up, not much, maybe to 550, 548. But it looks like we're going to make another trip down. We're closing at the lows. And, the old technicians, the old Chicago technicians that I used to talk to have always said, you got to watch the closes, the daily closes and the weekly closes, especially. Tomorrow's close is going to be super important when you see what unemployment number is, where that goes. I don't think unemployment really matters in this. That's
None of these
way
numbers matter. First of all, they're all
overshadowed.
bogus. They're all bogus anyway because people are front running these tariffs, and the numbers are going to be crazy for another month or two.
Yeah, it's way overshadowed by any political statement. We could have a political statement tonight that'll change the whole picture in 20 minutes again. But I think tomorrow's close is going to be very significant in for each stock and for the averages as a whole.
We had a long talk today about, and I think DOGE is a big piece of what's happening. Um, People are down on Trump. And you see what I wrote on Facebook this morning? Nobody likes a guy who shows up with a chainsaw in your backyard and tries to cut down your money tree. And you get more pissed off at him when you find out he lives in a forest of money trees.
Full of money trees. That's right.
So I mean, this guy, he's engendered so much bile and vitriol that it really is remarkable that he's continuing to do the job. I mean, the guy doesn't need it, and he's finding stuff. So that came up in my meeting today, and I said, he's going to look bad until Pam Bondi files charges against the guy who sold 400,000 Social Security numbers, or find some guy who's been. When they start to file charges, and you can say, all right, this was real, I think he'll be vindicated. Because there's so much stuff there. I mean, Mr. Magoo could have found stuff. And
Yeah, things that's taken this administration 6 weeks to look at weren't even addressed in 4 years. Five, it really is embarrassing when you look back at what we were, and people are still crucifying.
I heard Musk say, okay, the Social Security system would not would not talk to their system would not talk to other systems. So for people in the Small Business Administration, could not go verify a Social Security number with Social Security. That those systems didn't talk to each other. So right there, you got a guy applying for a small business loan with a bogus Social Security number that he bought for maybe $500 from some guy, who knows, right? And these systems are not talking to each other. So he uncovers this and writes a code so that one system talks to another. And all of a sudden now, he's a pariah. He's no good.
Right. I mean, I heard him say that early on when DOGE was first brought up because he said there's so many bogus Social Security numbers out there. Some left politicians, I forget exactly who, had said, well, they're not collecting. And he said, you're right, they're not collecting from Social Security. They're collecting from 4 or 5 other different agencies because they have a Social Security number that's not valid.
Well, they're voting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's going to be a lot of that going on too.
Yeah, so I think Musk is going to look bad, continue to look bad, until such time as charges are filed against some of these yahoos that have been bilking the system for huge numbers.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that
I think you're gone, Fred. It looks like we have a technical difficulty.
for some reason I got bounced out. Okay. The
Back.
other side of the aisle seems to think that he's phoning up the numbers. We'll see. And as you say, once some indictments come out, then I think we'll know a little bit more. We'll have a little bit more faith in the whole process.
Somebody made a point today, I don't know if it's accurate, but they said that he has Asperger's syndrome. Did you know that?
I know he's on the spectrum. Yeah, I don't know what exactly is. You look at him; he's got some, some
They said
peculiarities there.
he's not good with a crowd. He has trouble reading a room, and he doesn't take social cues. And that may be all true. And I'm sure that's working against him. But meanwhile, he's the richest guy in the world. I
Yeah,
mean, he's the richest guy with Asperger's syndrome, if he's got it.
and he's the richest guy in the world, and he did it all on bets. When Tesla was going under, what was the first thing he did? Was it PayPal? He sold PayPal, put that money into Tesla. Then he took the money from Tesla, and he was at the end of the rope. And he said, all right, I'll put my own money up. I can't raise any more money. This is it. I'm going to put everything I have. And then things started to turn. And slowly but surely, and he took that money and he put it into SpaceX and took that money and put it into the Boring Company.
He's an amazing guy. I mean, it really is, and he's doing a job that really a lot of people could have done and wouldn't do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, DOGE is certainly something. Tariffs, I think, I think there's still a lot of problems. I know we spoke about it earlier today. You're not as negative as me. I think that you're going to get a lot of pushback. A lot of people want to save face, and they're not going to walk away from this. They're not going to slink away. I think there's going to be a little bit more fight to it. And I see the index is down another 10+%.
Let me raise this to you. I mean, you accept that money talks and bullshit walks, right? So the political class is driven by the donor class. So where's that donor money emanating from? From businesses. And those businesses are either going to benefit or suffer from these tariffs. If the businesses are U.S. businesses, they're going to benefit from the tariffs because they got an edge now against foreign competitors that they didn't have. So my conclusion, one of the reasons I'm not as negative as you on the tariffs, is I think the money that goes to political campaigns that money is going to benefit from the tariffs. It's going to take a while, 6 months, 9 months, but they see the handwriting on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
They know that competitor that's been beating them up is now going to lose X percent and not in margins and not going to be able to compete. So this is a net good over time. And the question is how long? Now here's the rub. The Democrats are trying to run out the clock. They're doing lawfare and anything they could to stall the agenda. So the question any investor has to make is Trump going to be successful in implementing his agenda before, let's say, March of 26? Is he going to be done by the latest first quarter of 26? Is he going to have this all tied up with a ribbon on it? Or are the Democrats going to be able to stall him that long? And that's the question. I think that's the trade. If you can boil it down to that, pick a side, make your bet.
So that leaves us with 6 to 9 months of people pulling their hair out, screaming, "The sky is falling."
Well,
That's what I
I don't
see.
know about. Well, yeah, maybe, but things are going to pop up like Pam Bondi. There's game changers around every corner here. There's a lot of different stuff, and if DOGE finds some of the money that legitimately they say they're finding, Trump's going to give that back to constituents, and there's your stimulus right there. All of a sudden, you're walking into a check for $5,000. You didn't see. It's going to buy a lot of votes. It's going to change a lot of sentiment to what these guys are doing. And the tax benefits are there too.
And, I understand it's going to be tough for the Democrats to vote against that if it ever comes to the floor. I understand it would be a very unpopular vote to say, no, we're not going to give you your money back. But until we get to that point, until we see that, I'm going to be a little bit more negative. I'm going to look at things. Yeah.
And to support your argument, I would say to you that they find a way to spin it. Like this election in Wisconsin, the spin was the richest man in the world wants to buy a judge. And that was a brilliant spin. I don't think it was the case. I don't think Musk was trying to get anything from buying a judge. And, I just don't think that I see him gaining anything from that. But nevertheless, that was the argument, and I'm sure it got a lot of votes.
And yet Wisconsin did vote for voter ID. So the liberal judge was elected, but the state did vote for voter ID, which, when I read the conservative spin is that's okay. We don't have to worry about the next election because we're going to have voter ID.
Yeah.
So,
Valid point.
yeah.
And let's face it, we live in a giant Jerry Springer show. I mean, this is it. We're here. And every issue is a plastic explosive that could blow up the market in one direction or another.
We've been talking about the piece we did the other day, event risk by volatility. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because when we say buy volatility, I would say the majority of people who are watching, listening, don't know what that entails, right? Buy volatility to me, very simplistic, is buy options. And when you buy options, it comes with Greeks, delta, gamma, vega. And not to get into the math of it and go through all the breakdown, but delta, if you look at the delta of an option, in very, very simplistic layman's terms, is the percentage that that option is going to be exercised, right?
Let me phrase it a different way. Most financial products are money in, money out, and for how long, and a rate attached to that. Options are primarily about probabilities. How likely is the strike price going to be met? What's the probability? What are the odds? That's why guys like us love them.
Right, right.
They were all about odds makers and probabilities.
It's like being at the crap table, right? You get that's right.
So the probability is built into the option, and we call that volatility.
Delta. We call that the delta. Volatility is the speed at which it's moving up and down, but
Well, we call it the vol.
Yeah.
We call it the vol, or the implied volatility. But any option, you got the right to buy or to sell, and the probability of that being worth money changes when the stock price moves. So it's all about probability, and probability is all about volatility. I mean, if something's extremely volatile, then you got to pay more for that option. If it's not so volatile, then you got to pay less.
Right. The point I wanted to make is when we say trade the vol. So if you buy an option for, an option to sell Tesla at 300, and all of a sudden, and you buy it, and when the stock's at 300, that's a 50 delta. So there's a 50-50 chance that that's going to be in the money, right?
Yeah.
And the stock goes down to 250, and it's swinging by $40 a day. So maybe if it goes down to 250, you want to buy some of that back. And then when it goes back up to 300, you sell that out. That's called trading the delta, trading the volatility. That's capturing that benefit of volatility. And I just wanted to, let people
I used to
understand that.
approach this a different way in seminars. I would say, here's a stock that haven't moved for the last 100 years. And it's trading at 80. And it's been at 80 since, somewhere in the 1950s. So, would you buy an option on this stock? Well, you might if interest rates are 20%, because there's a financing game that you can play by shorting the stock and raising money, and there's no risk to you because it hasn't moved and it'll never move. So there's that component of the option price. But the other component, far more important component, is how likely is it to move past the strike price? And we call that vol. They call it implied volatility, but it's volatility. So when you see things like, what's the thing we trade? I'm losing the VIX. When you see the VIX, that's volatility. And volatility went up from 18 or 19 last week to 26 today. That's vol. Volatility has moved, and the VIX is telling you that. And the VIX is comprised of measuring the risk components in all these options. So we've been saying for most of the year now that vol is cheap, buy vol, until they prove that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's going to be around for a while. We've talked about people making stupid comments, and all of a sudden, it's a 3% move here or a 4% move there, and it could be anywhere at any time.
Well, I don't think it's cheap at 26. It's a lot less cheap at 26 than it was at 19.
Yeah. I'm not talking about buying the VIX. I'm talking about buying underlying stocks. Options on underlying stocks. Put spreads, call spreads, strangles, straddles, all of that,
They're already priced for big volatility is what I'm saying. Today definitely helped that.
Yeah. But it's not going away. That's my point.
No,
It's not going away. You're going to pick your spots, and you're going to capture a good
Rock and
opportunity.
roll is here to stay.
That's right. That's for sure. Um, so what else did I want to talk to you about? Oh yeah. So how are the foreigners reacting to the tariffs? I look at somebody like I know you said there's probably a lot of backdoor negotiations going on, and I'm sure there are. But these people have to save face. And you look at some of the, politicians overseas, like I take Mark Carney, for example. He's running for the premier of Canada. I don't see him backing down. I don't see him taking a backward step. I think, we haven't seen it yet where they're going to put additional tariffs on U.S. products, but I can't see him saying, all right, well, we'll accept this and we're going to come back to the table. I think there's going to be a little bit more nose to nose pushback.
Yeah, there'd be some of that, but I think more public than private. I think publicly they're going to say, you're not going to get away with this. And privately they're going to say, can you give me something on this? And what if I do this? And, or I'm going to go on TV tonight and I'm going to really come down on you, Howard. Don't pay any rabbit ass mind to it because it's all for publication. That's all. So I think that's what's happening right now. I think those meetings are going on. And you're right, they're gonna make a stand. They have to. They have to save face. You know, Canadians in particular, because of the 51st state
Yeah,
argument,
yeah,
and they've got a leg up on that. Trump really gave them that. You know, that's a dart that they're going to throw at him,
yeah. They have their
and
backup. Yeah,
and it rings true to the populace. But you're going to drink Canadian Scotch or you're going to drink bourbon? That's the question. You know, after a couple of weeks of, oh, I have Seagram's here on the phone, Mr. Prime Minister. Now tell him I'll call him back. I think there's a lot of money at stake here, and Trump is making an argument, and I think it's a valid argument that after World War II, we set up these trade deals to resurrect Europe and to resurrect Asia, and we have the consumer. But he's saying to the world now, if you want to reach the American consumer, I got a gate around it, and it's going to cost you. We've given you free access to the American consumer, and you haven't given access to your markets. I mean, how many Fords you see driving around in Germany versus how many BMWs you see driving around here? The playing field hasn't been level for decades. So he's right about that. I don't like the way he phrases it. He says they've been ripping us off. They haven't been ripping us off. We've been letting them. We constructed this. So don't blame them for what we did. And he has said in his more lucid moments, I can't blame them. They took advantage of us and we were stupid.
right,
Okay, that I'll go with.
right.
And it's more like it. But he's really saying World War II is over now. You guys are no longer lesser developed countries. Germany, we gave you first generation steel mills. Japan, we gave you first generation steel mills. And now we can't sell steel until we revitalize our steel industry. And we need a steel industry.
You just talked about World War II. What happens if war breaks out next?
Ah, okay.
That's the scary part to me because I can see all the earmarks going on. A lot of talk about ships in the Gulf and this, war games here and war games there. And
Well, first of all, trade war just broke out. So trade war is here. Kinetic war, I think we're going to see that in the Middle East. I think we will see kinetic war. And I think Trump's approach to this is I'm redesigning the theaters of engagement, right? And I'm going to put a sheriff in each theater to be the speed bump. And hopefully you guys can take care of it. And if you can't, we're here. So he's saying to Europe, NATO, you fix Russia and Ukraine. You defend.
how does NATO do that without the U.S. being the major player?
The U.S. Provides them arms in exchange for reduction in tariffs and whatever else, right? But U.S. will do it. U.S. will give you the F-35s and the F-16s and call us if you need us. But we're not prepared to put troops on the ground unless it's a dire emergency.
Right.
So then you take the Middle East. He's saying to Israel, look, you got to do it. Yeah. We'll train your pilots. We'll give you we're there. We got ships in the Gulf. We'll provide you all the support you need. We'll give you the intelligence, anything you need. Not that Israel needs any intelligence,
Right.
but and that's his approach. And he's redesigning the theaters of war. Our theater got bigger. It goes up north of Greenland, and it goes south. And I talked to a military guy today, and I said, "Do you think in Latin America he's going to lean on Argentina?" He said, "Yeah, I think Argentina is the likely candidate." And then Colombia's starting to come around too now. So, I mean, this is the way he's redesigning the world, and he's redesigning his Defense Department that way as well.
So you think that is it possible to say that these trade wars are, I don't want to say a precursor to what could be a shooting war somewhere in the world, that he's going to back them down?
Could you repeat the question and rephrase it, please?
Are, they, are these trade wars the beginning salvo of forcing other countries to step up and deal with military issues that we're reluctant to?
I will say to you that I'm going to use a word that's an overused bullshit word, and the word is holistic. I think he's taking a holistic approach so that inside the trade war conversation, the defense conversation is included. And the raw material and minerals conversation is included. And it's like, look, we got a lot to talk about here. These are all the chips that I have. What are the chips that you have? Okay, I'll give you 2 chips for one of those. And that's really what's going on. And with media is trying to simplify it. I mean, every editor is saying to his reporter, shrink it down to black and white. And these issues are not black and white. That's why God gave us gray hair, to prove to us that the world's not black and white. This is not a black and white conversation.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. There are a lot of chips on the table. I just I've been reading a lot about the potential for war, um, pushing back against Iran, what's going on with China and Taiwan. You know, there's a lot of hot spots building up, and if they come into 2 or 3 different theaters with what we have and what it looks like, we have no friends as of today. How do you solve those problems?
Well, you want to keep your economy stable? You want access to the American consumer? Okay, build up your defense in this area or that area. The real problem, the one that is, I'm going to say insurmountable, is Taiwan. I mean, I don't see how he can launch. I mean, he's making nice with the Philippines and Japan and maybe to some extent Australia, but none of them are going to be able to defend Taiwan if the Chinese make a play to want it. But if they make a play, he's saying to them, you're not going to sell a paperclip into the United States. And then China has really got a problem. Because if they don't have a market to sell all their shit, they could have revolutions. You know, one thing about China, there's a reason that you have General Tso's chicken and and General Wang's cauliflower, because all of these warlords have taken hold in positions in China that's so vast. You know a hell of a lot more about China than I do. And there's an inland China and an external coastal China, and there's a lot of different Chinas, and they need the U.S. consumer. And he could lose control, or the party could lose control very easily and face revolutions in regions without U.S. consumers. And I think they recognize that.
What happens if, and this is a crazy idea, but if Putin pushes and does invade a NATO country and forces Article 5, where the U.S. has to step up and support a friend?
I think he's on the brink of nuclear war, and then we won't have to worry about this podcast anymore.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about anything anymore. Yeah, it's a scary thought, but I read somewhere today, what if, a what if.
Then the options volatility is too cheap.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right. Any other thoughts, comments?
I don't know. I mean, I'm watching this market and trading it, and trying to stay ahead of the move and the backward spikes and the responses. And you got to keep a close eye on it. I think if you're one of these buy and hold and live with it, you probably will see lower prices to scale into a position. But I think in a year to 18 months from now, you're going to be very happy you held on.
I think the close tomorrow is going to be very important. I think if we break through some of these technical support levels in the Dow and the S&P and various stocks, you're going to be looking at a bad week next week. The Sunday talk shows are going to fill up with, bringing all the both sides. They're
You don't see an administration response to that, like, hey, DOGE just found $700 billion. You guys are going to see checks for $10,000
I
each.
think if we see that, yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen quickly. I think that you still gotta be able to get that money back, or at least stop it from going out, right? And I think that's a process, and I don't think it's going to be as quick as next week.
Well, this market, not thinking about what we think, but what the market thinks, this
Mhm.
market is going to look to the Fed and say, step in here and put a put on it. And that's wrapped up in its own set of problems. The Fed's kind of in a box because the inflation numbers have not been good, and they don't really. I mean, they can influence this economy, and they could stop a sell-off probably if things get really bad and they start dropping rates and stepping in. The
I don't
bond
know.
market's not gonna like that.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that as when is bad news bad news? If the Fed comes in and it's panic, they have to ease in order to avert panic. I think people will look past that. Look past the short term rate move.
I'd have to agree with that, but it might put a buffer on things until such time as Congress does something, or you know, you weren't around. Were you around for Graham Rudman? Do you remember that? After the '87 crash, Congress moved very quickly to pass Graham Rudman Hollings.
It's a different Congress than this. This is very obstructionist. I mean, there's the left doesn't want to, and the right doesn't either. I mean, they're just going to
Yeah.
buck heads all the way through.
You're
You
right
know,
about that.
and you made the point a couple of times that if DOGE does find that the trillions or hundreds of billions of dollars that they say they are, and checks are going to come out, it's got to go to the floor. It's got to be passed. It's got to be appropriated and sent out. It'll be very difficult for the liberals to vote against that, and the Senate and the House. I agree, but there's going to be some way, some spin that they don't want Trump and DOGE to have their day in the sun.
Yeah. At the very least, they'll delay it and try not to make it look like they're delaying it.
Right,
You know.
right. So I don't think anything like that is going to happen quickly. I think it's going to be a process. And meanwhile, next week, 2 weeks from now, people are going to look at their 401k statements, their IRA statements, and say, "Whoa, what happened here?" We were sailing along, happy, nice, everything was great, and all of a sudden we're down 15%. That's wrong.
And they're at the time of year they got to look at it too.
Yeah.
April 15th is coming
Yeah,
around.
you come down to tax date and you gotta, figure out how you're gonna make that payment. Yeah,
What's worse than having gains and no money to pay for the gains?
right, right. It's all disappeared. Yeah, yeah.
It's tough sledding here, and we're in the midst of it. All along I thought maybe it was the job numbers that were going to cause this. I didn't think the tariffs were going to have this kind of impact. I mean, they were a factor, and I thought they'll cause some consternation. But to me, it was we're going to cut the jobs number. The thing that scared me the most was Vivek Ramaswamy when they asked him, how would you cut the federal payroll in half? Well, anybody with an even Social Security number, they go. Odd number stays. Wow. I mean, that stopped me cold.
It's very easy. That's right. I remember that.
This guy's got real bullets in the gun. He's like, this is not paintball. This guy's playing for keeps. So just the fact that that was a prevailing consideration to me said, when these job numbers go south, this market's going to go south. And all of that's been in the background, but I
Yeah,
thought
we
the
haven't addressed
tariffs,
that yet.
yeah, yeah. So that's still ahead of us.
Yeah, I think we got until the end of the year. We got to suffer through the end of the year. We got to limp along, and it's a question of how far we go. You know, we've talked a number of times about people wanting to buy the dip, and is this a great opportunity? The guys you talked to today is, should I step in? Is it time to buy again? I don't know anybody that's saying I'm getting out, I'm going to cash. I haven't heard that yet. So you get these people that buy once, buy it 10% down, buy it another 5% down. I don't know if they buy it a third time down.
I had a guy today. This guy is probably close to 80 years old. And he said to me, I'm down $100,000. I'm not worth $100,000 to my wife. She may leave me. We may be going back, he's Puerto Rican. We may be going back to Puerto Rico. And she ain't going to go.
Yeah, I think this tough sledding, tough
This was a
sledding.
good, this was a wake up move, you know. This is the old joke with the horse and the stick. You remember me? Yeah. You want to get hit and again with the stick? No. Right? This was that. This market got smacked in the head by the 2x4.
Yeah, and the question is how many more smacks to the top of the head can you take before you throw in the towel?
I don't know. They've been conditioned. You got a whole generation of traders for the last 2 decades don't know anything but buy the dip, buy the dip.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's worked forever, and you can't fault them for it. I don't know. I think the world has changed. I always thought tariffs were going to be his negotiating ploy. I thought he was going to, stick his nose out. Yeah, take a punch. Yeah, take a
Well, I
punch.
had no doubt that he would pull the trigger, just to say, I'm real. This is not smoke and mirrors. I'm real. You know, he's a guy that proves to you that you have to take him seriously.
Right.
He's done that.
No matter what crazy things he says.
He says things and they turn out to be true or mostly true, or he really is trying to buy Greenland. He really is. He's got the vice president and his wife there trying to buy Greenland.
Going on a site inspection.
Yeah. Well, you got tires on this, babe? Let me see.
We laugh, but there are parts of the world that are not happy about that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
you know. Hey, listen, we constructed this machine in 1945, and it's taken a long time for somebody to look at it and say, we got to rework this mechanism somehow. And he's doing that. And it was inevitable. Somebody had to do it sometime. He's just doing it before it's really obvious that it has to be done.
Well,
All right.
let's see where we go. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your thoughts. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody, again. Subscribe, ring the bell. Let us
Ring
know
the
what
bell,
you're
ring the
thinking.
bell.
Ring the bell, ring the bell. Thanks.